Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Tish Millsap, and I am the Vice President of Marketing at .NET Nuke Corporation. I'm very happy to be the host of today's web seminar. We have with us today Eric Baguette, the Director of Online Marketing from Steady Rain, and Liz Fathman, the Publications Manager from the Missouri Botanical Garden. They're here to tell us a little bit about their success using .NET Nuke to revamp and change their website. Welcome, Eric and Liz. Good morning. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just before we get started, I want to do a couple of logistical things, just some housekeeping. I want to make sure everyone's comfortable with the web seminar platform. If you have any questions, if you just raise your hand, let me know if you can hear me. And if you can see my slide, please use the raise your hand feature again to let me know. There's going to be a lot of questions throughout this, so I want you to feel free to ask questions at any time using your GoToWebinar software. Before we get started, I'd like to familiarize you all with .NET Nuke. Some of you may know us, some of you may not. I'm going to take about 3 or 4 minutes to tell you a little bit about us. So at .NET Nuke, we're a software company. We have a web content management system with a bunch of additional capabilities. One common theme that we come across with customers is the problem of business agility. By that, I mean they struggle with doing things faster, doing them more efficiently, as well as affordably, and scaling their business in an environment of unpredictable change. I'm asking you to think back to the year 2000 and what the internet was like then. At that time, the web was very static, but as you know, in the past 10 years, things have changed dramatically. But really, who could have predicted the growth in social interactions, and who could have known how absolutely critical mobile devices would become in delivering content? Fundamentally, how we use websites has changed from just a source of information to a place of meaningful interaction anywhere, anytime around the globe. So what we're encouraging our customers and prospects to think about is making the right platform decision that allows you to adapt quickly to that unpredictable change on the web. So at .NET Nuke, we're a software company. We have a web content management system, and we really like to help our customers adapt quickly, to move fast, and take advantage of new opportunities for their online presence. A little bit about us. We're the world's #1 web content management system in the Microsoft ecosystem. We just ticked over 2,000 customers. Because of our open source nature of our business, there are over 700,000 websites around the world that are powered by DNN, and over the years we've had about 7 million downloads of the software. We also have an online marketplace called the .NET Nuke Store, and there are thousands of modules which make building a website very fast and affordable for our customers. And finally, last but not least, we have a very large and strong community of folks that contribute to the open source project and have a depth of knowledge about .NET Nuke. A few months ago, we did a comprehensive study of our customers, and we did it with a third party called Tech Validate. We had some really interesting results. About 95% of our customers said that they were able to improve their efficiency using .NET Nuke, and 94% of them said that .NET Nuke helped them save money. And we are also able to help our customers get to market faster. Our survey showed that 81% of our customers felt they were able to get to market significantly faster because of .NET Nuke. Just to finish up, .NET Nuke comes in 3 different versions: our free community edition, our professional edition, and our enterprise edition, each with its own set of features and functions. I encourage you to visit our website and learn more about each of these. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Liz and Eric and have them tell you the story of how the Missouri Botanical Gardens went from their old website to their new website using .NET Nuke. Welcome, Eric and Liz.
Thank you.
Great. It's great to have you guys here. You guys have a phenomenal story to tell, and I'm really excited for our audience to hear it.
We like telling it.
Exactly. So,
great.
Thanks again. Again, my name is Eric Baguette. I am the Director of Online Marketing as well as a Senior Internet Strategist at Steady Rain. Steady Rain was founded in '99. We're a full-service digital agency offering strategy, design, development, online marketing services with the specialization in .NET Nuke integrations. So that's just a little bit about Steady Rain. I wanted to allow Liz to talk a little bit about the garden and their history.
So the Missouri Botanical Garden has been around since the middle of the 19th century. So we have a lot of history. So one of the things that we're known for is being a historical site. But we're also one of the top 3 botanical gardens in the world. And by that I mean we are a research institution as well as a tourist attraction. We have the #1 plant data resource in the world, a website called Tropicos that's used by botanical researchers globally. We have a staff of research botanists, horticulturists, and other individuals who are working around the world collecting plant specimens, identifying them. We have a herbarium with some 7 million specimens. So we're a pretty place to visit, but we're also a powerhouse in research. So that probably leads a lot of you to assume that we have a pretty complicated website, which is true, and we're going to tell you about that.
Indeed. So really what I wanted to touch on were some of the challenges that we faced when we began the project with the garden as far as retooling their website and essentially starting over in a large degree. So really what I hope to accomplish today was go through some of the challenges that we faced as well as how we approached those challenges and came out with solutions. So some of the challenges were that, you know, obviously Missouri Botanical Garden needed a totally new modern look and feel, which was one of the primary components of the new website, really, though it went far beyond just the visuals. We had numerous challenges to face and overcome. The biggest of those challenges was simply understanding their current digital landscape. And so as part of a comprehensive consulting and planning phase, we documented all the current websites, applications, databases driving all those applications. And what we found was that we had uncovered more than 70 different databases that were powering the existing website. So that was certainly something that we had to take a look at, as well as a tremendous amount of content that we had to address, which I'm going to let Liz speak to a little more.
Right. So with an organization as big as ours and with as many different sort of moving parts as we have, the content on our old website had accumulated over many, many years and was being added to the website for different reasons by different people in different settings. And so we had not only a large volume of content, but a wide range of types of content. And it was not very well organized. It was difficult to find pieces when things needed to be edited. It was really hard to find that content. So on our main website, we, and we'll show you some examples of the old website, but we just had an awful lot of depth and breadth to our content, but not a whole lot of organization. We also are challenged by having a couple of different locations. So we have the main campus here in St. Louis, but we also have a location out in a suburb. It's the Butterfly House, which is one of our partner institutions, as well as a nature reserve out in the exurbs. So they also both had websites that were being managed by different people and had different domain names. And so it wasn't always obvious that they were partner organizations. So we had to kind of take on that challenge as well. The navigation also was something that we really wanted to look at because, like the content, which had a lot of different authors and uses, we also have lots of different audiences who come to our website needing different things. Some people are casual visitors. They just want to know when we're open and how much it costs to come in. And other people are researchers or historians or garden enthusiasts or master gardeners, and they have very different needs. And so we had to try to figure out a way to make that content accessible, easily accessible to people without having to do a whole lot of digging around.
So beyond that too, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, with taking a look at kind of their digital landscape and what existed, there was obviously a lot of key functionality that needed to be replaced, enhanced, and then actually in some areas there were areas where we needed to develop functional elements for the site in order for the new site to take on the look and functionality that people were expecting. So we're going to look at a few of those areas later in the discussion so that we can get just an idea of some of the things that we did to not only replace and enhance the functionality on the site, but also to take a look at ways that we could improve what was already there by adding new functionality.
Right. And one of the other things that .NET Nuke was really helpful in was helping us change our internal workflow processes. So previously we had one web editor who was responsible for making any kind of change to our website that was requested. And there were a couple of other people around the garden who had the skill set and they had access to the files, but it was pretty much one person doing all the work. And what we decided was with .NET Nuke, we could actually empower the content experts to be the ones that added and edited their own content. So we'll talk a little bit about how we set up that workflow, but we really spread the wealth a lot, and we made the process a little more democratic. We made it a lot more participatory, and we let content experts actually have access to the website so that they could put their own content up there.
Awesome.
All right. So we want to sort of talk about the look and the feel of the website. You know, when people think about changing a website, the first thing I think most people think of is the way it looks. So our website was looking pretty old and stale, and so I think the impetus for making this change in the first place was to change the way that it looked. So we got with Steady Rain and we came up with some really good designs, I think. The other challenge was to incorporate the other sites, the off-site locations that I was mentioning earlier, into the new website, so make them actually part of a single website, but retain their separate identity, because a lot of visitors go to those other places and maybe never come here, or they don't necessarily think of them as part of the Missouri Botanical Garden. And our president was very interested in co-branding all of those sites, but also, you know, with the knowledge that people know them as separate entities. So it was kind of a dual challenge, right? How to make them seem like us, but also how to make them still seem like themselves. So I think we did a really good job of figuring out a solution to that problem, which we'll show you. So the old and the new websites are up here, sort of side by side. In the next slide. So you can see on the left was what our website used to look like, and that image up at the top was on sort of a rotator. The images would kind of fly in from all different directions, but really slowly, and it was really disconcerting to look at, frankly. You know, so basically, sort of a standard 1990s model website. And the left navigation you can see on the side was a fly-out navigation, but often the navigation that would fly out would not match what you would get when you landed on the page. So it was pretty confusing and a little bit hard to find stuff. Actually, a lot hard to find stuff. The new site, the one on the right, is the way it looks now. So we freshened up the color scheme. We, I think, made better use of that homepage. We put a little wallpaper behind it so that the screen size or the monitor size could accommodate a small or a large image. Previously, the monitor size would affect, on the old site, the amount of just green space you would see. So the look is much cleaner. We'll talk about these different navigational features a little bit later, but you can see how it's broken up into sort of a top pane, a middle content area and then a bottom navigational pane. With Missouri Botanical Garden persistently across the top of every page, so that's how we kind of accomplish the branding message of all of these websites. So that's that. It still, it still looks like a garden. It still has the green colors and everything. So the next slide is an example of how we address the challenge of having to co-brand and retain some difference as well. So on the left side, you'll see the Butterfly House, which is one of our off-site locations. And it's got its own look. It's got a blue color scheme. The layout's slightly different. The navigation on those pages actually is on the left. So underneath the Butterfly House, you'll see a list of phrases, and those are navigation. Those go to different sections of the website. And the right side, you'll see what we call Just for Kids. We have a children's garden, and we have a lot of programming for families and children. And that follows the same structure as the Butterfly House. It's got its own color scheme, so it's got that yellow and kind of kid-friendly colors. But I want you to notice that one of the differences is that on the children's garden, you'll see the words across the top. They're navigational elements: the visit, things to do, gardens and gardening, etc. And on the Butterfly House, you don't see that. And that's because those words refer to navigation at the main campus, not at the off-site locations. And so people were getting on the off-site sections, and they were inadvertently clicking down those navigational, their mega menus, which we'll show you in a minute, and then starting to navigate within the garden's main site, and they were getting very confused. So on the off-site locations, we ghosted those so that that's not an option. That drop-down does not happen. But for the site, for these sort of sub-sites within the garden, that navigational structure is persistent. We have a couple of other ones. So besides the children's garden, we have gardening help pages for the master gardeners and horticulturists. And we are currently working on getting our science and conservation content migrated over to the website as well. And that will have the same kind of treatment as well.
So going back to the kind of database issue that we found, so as we begin to delve into the site, the old site, and take a look at what was under the hood essentially and find out what was powering it, again, what we found were databases. And essentially what had happened here was over a 10-year period, the website at that time had been developed and redeveloped and added on to. Which was a big part of the reason why when we got in and we started looking at things, we found that there were a lot of different things going on, many of those written in classic ASP, just to give you an idea. So we spent a lot of time during the planning process finding and documenting all of the different websites and the applications driving those websites. And we basically use that information to help inform our development plan, identifying items that needed to be updated or replaced, and identifying any new functional elements. In addition to that, there were a lot of applications, and there were also multiple partner organizations that Liz had just discussed that we had to take into consideration as well, because at that time, those were all separate websites being managed differently by the individual groups. So one of the goals of the project was to start to bring some of those into the Missouri Botanical brand and also let them benefit from the implementation of a content management system. So, the most important part of this really was that no one was using any content management system. Again, these were systems that had been custom developed over time, and they were really handled by a very small group of staff. So updates to the site were often very difficult and very painful. So what we did, of course, is to overcome this pain of no content management was, obviously we set up .NET Nuke as the CMS platform for the new website. And we also brought in some of those partner organizations so that they could also begin to take advantage of content management so we could have more consistency and alleviate a lot of the issues that partner organizations were having with their own website separate from the garden. So, the way that this way we could essentially accomplish the garden's branding goals and improve internal efficiency at the same time. So one of the interesting points of this project was the garden's use of roles and workflows, which Liz can talk to a little bit more to help, with that transition as well for them coming in.
Yeah, so we set up the workflows to mirror, like, I guess a newspaper would be a good analogy. So we have contributors that add content, and they can also edit content. They're the content experts. So we have people in horticulture that add that content. We have people in education that add their content, and so on. And then every division of the garden who has a presence on the website has a section editor, and those people are responsible for approving the content, making sure that it's accurate, making sure there's nothing in there that they don't want the public to see, making sure the images are the best ones they can find. So they're really responsible for the content. And then the publishers, or the web editors, are a very small group of people who are basically in charge of final approval. And they're the ones that actually publish the content. So every group in that workflow has an increasingly large set of responsibilities and capabilities within .NET New. Content contributors can do very little. They can add and edit content. That's about it. Section editors can add and edit content, and they can approve content. They can do a few more things. And then the publishers have full access and full rights within .NET New to publish or reject or approve any of the content. So it does still go through a number of eyeballs, but instead of one person having to go in and make both large and small changes to every page of the website, we have a team of people that now do that. And we meet on a monthly basis. We meet with the section editors, and we talk about trends in website development and user engagement, and we pose problems to the group, and we come up with group solutions. And everybody seems to be pretty happy with that. A lot of people were pretty resistant at first, and it's not really a formal part of very many people's jobs to be a website contributor. But I think that once they all learned the system and they realized that it's very easy to use and it's pretty intuitive, and that was not a pain point any longer. And now people, I think, have some pride of ownership, and they can sort of, it's almost a feather in the cap to be considered part of the web team at the garden. So one of the other kind of practical reasons for having this many contributors is that large volume of content that I talked about. We had a lot of pages of some very important content, some not so important content. The content was being indexed sort of haphazardly in a way. We had a lot of URLs, and Eric can talk about that in a minute as well. But we just wanted to sort of get it all pulled together into one house, basically. We also had a lot of outdated content. A lot of people sort of treated the website, and some still do treat the website as kind of a repository or an archive. And so pages would get put up, and they would never get taken down. When we were doing the discovery, we were surprised almost every day to discover some new page that had been buried in the site map and the site structure, and that had content that was, maybe last touched in the late 1990s or early 2000s or something like that. So, so we looked at this as an opportunity to really kind of weed out some of that content as well. And then, Eric, I guess you would want to talk about some of the database content too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, beyond, the enormity of content from, informational content, a lot of that content was being driven by custom databases. One in particular was Plant Finder. It was identified early on that Plant Finder had to be a part of the new solution. It's really a go-to source for gardeners and a critical area of the site. So we knew we were going to have to develop a plan to integrate Plant Finder into the new solution, which we'll talk about a little bit more and actually look at a kind of a screenshot of what Plant Finder looks like today within the .NET Nuke integration. But first, I think it's important to talk a little bit. I know Liz had mentioned the enormous amount of content that had been indexed by search engines. One of the things that we viewed as very important was to ensure that we were taking that into consideration with any new approach to a new website, and that we had something that would point people to the new website if they were looking for old content. So, we wanted to make sure that links and bookmarks and things like that were not lost, and to have as smooth as transition as possible for SEO purposes. So we implemented a legacy URL tool that we developed. Basically, this tool enables the garden to manage redirects old sites to their new site, since we also switched domains, which we haven't mentioned, where we went from mobot.org to MissouriBotanicalGarden.org. Today, mobot.org still redirects, but it goes to MissouriBotanicalGarden.org. So since there was so much content, we wanted to make sure that longtime users of the website would get the best user experience possible if they came back and had an old bookmark in their browser or other links on other sites that were pointing to great content. So, we talked a lot about and planned a lot around how do we ensure that not only from a user experience that users get the best experience going from the old site to the new site, but also that we minimize as much as possible any search engine losses from the new content organization of the website.
Right. So in going through the process of trying to determine what content was going to be migrated over and what content would be maybe archived or just deleted altogether, we spent a lot of time with a lot of Excel spreadsheets kind of mapping out the old website page by page and handing that over to the section editors or to the stakeholders in those areas to have them go through their content on the old site and make some determinations about what content they felt was still relevant, still important, still absolutely needed to migrate over, and then what content could maybe be left or reworked or mothballed for another time. So we gave people about 4 options. We asked them to determine whether the content needed to be migrated as is, migrated with some edits or changes, hung on to, and maybe in an archive we kept the old site as a garden-only accessible site where all the content still resides, or just get rid of it altogether. Because when we switched over from the old to the new, we want to obviously have content on that new website. So we spent a couple of months moving content and organizing it and editing it. So some divisions really did a great job with that. They jumped right in. They made some really critical edits. They looked at it with a fresh eye. And other departments, like I've mentioned earlier, who sort of view the website as an archive, decided that everything needed to move over, so we had to kind of step in and help people make some determinations. And we were using the analogy, and I think it's still a good analogy, of moving a house. So some people are really organized when they move their house, and they put the boxes in the room where the stuff that they're moving, is. They label them properly. Everything gets moved into the new house and goes into the right room, and it's easy peasy. And other people maybe start out that way and then just start throwing stuff in any old box and spend a long time unpacking it at the new place. So I was trying to use that analogy to help people understand that it's no less important to be organized about the content when you're moving it from one website to another. So a lot of people did a really good job of that, and there's some areas that we're still unpacking and we're still trying to clean them up. So.
Absolutely. So some of that content couldn't be moved page by page, like Plant Finder that we discussed a few minutes ago, and we had to figure out a way to get Plant Finder onto the .NET Nuke implementation. At the time when we first looked at it, we thought about a few different approaches, and there were actually several iterations and a lot of conversations around how to get this moved over. One of the issues was that it was in Microsoft Access, so it was really dated, and it was going to be, in that state, impossible for us to be able to leverage that information in the new .NET website. So what we did was we redeveloped it in MS SQL, and we built a module for displaying that information from Plan Finder. And what we have here is just a screenshot from the website of Plan Finder. It's a pretty complex tool in the sense that it gives a lot of options as far as being very granular in how you want to do your search for a particular plant, and a lot of different options. So again, we went through many iterations of this to get it just right, and even this year went ahead and did some performance updates, some additions on it as well. But it was a large part of the content migration that kind of took place in one big piece of just rebuilding Plant Finder and making it accessible on the .NET side.
Yeah, that was a pretty big piece. So in addition to moving all that database content and all the web page content, another challenge that we had was with the navigation. The old site, again, really only had one entry point for every piece of web content. That left navigation. It wasn't necessarily that intuitive, and so I think we may have overcompensated, but I don't think that's a bad thing. We've made the content accessible from a lot of different points in a lot of different ways, and one of them is by this kind of user-based or audience-based approach. So we are setting up landing pages for people who self-identify as either a member or a visitor, an educator, a horticulturist, a gardener, or a researcher. Those were the audiences that we identified early on when we were coming up with the design elements and the user interface as people that most often come and use our website. And there was a lot of, I think it was interesting to educate Steady Rain about the difference between the horticulturist and a gardener, which to a lot of people seems like one and the same people. In some cases they are, but not always. So, so we wanted to make sure that we made that content easily found by those people, and also made the content that they got to relevant to their interests. So one of the ways that we did that was to implement what we're calling a mega menu, or a mega navigation menu. So we have tabs that drop down that give you more information and show you kind of what's in each section of the garden. So that's the middle slot. The middle piece there is a drop-down menu for gardens and gardening. So we have sections about the gardens here. We have sections about home gardening, and then other kind of organizations that we're affiliated with, in classes that we offer for gardeners, some of the other programs that we have. So you can see at a glance all of the kinds of content that you'll get when you click on one of those pages. The other thing we have is in this bottom piece is you'll see info for, and then we list out all of those groups. So members, visitors, gardeners, etc. So those links will eventually take you to a landing page that's got just some sort of general information, and then that links out to other more specific information that those audiences might like. And then in the top, and I think we'll be able to show you a live example of this, but in the top we have this slide rotator, and the left navigation down the side there actually changes the slide deck that you see, changes the images in that rotator. So we thought that that would be a great place to put marketing messages or other kinds of messages. So whenever we have events, which we have a lot of, we put a banner ad up there about those. We allow education to feature some of their classes or registration times, things like that. So that's been a really fun tool to use and to work with. It does get a little confusing to some people because I think people think it's navigating them to a page, and it really just changes the slide. So that's an internal issue that we have to sort of work through, maybe making it more obvious that those are just pictures and not links to web pages. But those are some of the solutions to the problems of getting access to our great depth and breadth of content on the website.
I wanted to touch on some of the functional elements that were implemented on the site from both a custom perspective as well as the third-party modules that we leveraged for this site. Events are a huge part of the garden. It's one of the things that, throughout the year there are lots of different events that are occurring. And they really wanted a better way to manage events on their website. So their needs were really specific to the point that we decided that really a module for events management, a custom module, was going to be the way to go. So also, as Liz had mentioned, really a part of the planning that went into this was a way to serve multiple audiences in the most effective way possible. And there are quite a number we looked at a few minutes ago. So we wanted to create a way for them to be able to message and market to those audiences on the home page without creating a lot of clutter. So as a result, what we ended up developing was the custom Rotator module that Liz was just discussing. And in addition, we used a variety of third-party modules. This is really not the exhaustive list. I just listed a that were really utilized more often on the site. Dig article. There's a Lightbox gallery. We use the Ajax content rotator throughout the site except on the home page. Ifinity URL Master for SEO-friendly URL rewriting. And there's quite a few other third-party modules that we have installed and configured and skinned on the site that are doing, a lot of the heavy lifting from a functional standpoint. Really, one of the items that we were really proud of and excited about was the custom events module. And really, part of that reason is because it gives the garden a lot of flexibility and growth potential. So we have essentially one part of it that is event management, which allows them to go in and create events and manage those events internally. And one of the approaches that we took, this also in reaction to a lot of different audiences and how do we speak to all these different audiences, we carried all that learning over into the module development in the form of listener modules. So essentially giving people or giving a way to target specific audiences throughout the website, which we can take a look at as far as a visual representation of it in just a moment. But essentially the way the listener modules work are events are tagged with a specific keyword or keywords, and listener modules have settings on them where you can set what you want to listen to. So there may be a listener module on the Butterfly House page that is listening just for Butterfly House tagged events, and it pulls those events in to create a much easier way for the garden to manage events. If I'm not mistaken, Liz, you can correct me if I'm wrong, prior to this, events on the old site a lot of them were being handled in just strictly HTML.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, in my opinion, this was one of the more exciting parts of this project for me, was getting this in place for them to begin to have a little bit better way to manage events at the garden on the website.
Yeah.
Again, we also
way better way.
Yeah, way better way. Okay. We also developed the image rotator, which we're going to take a look at, as Liz had said, on the live site, so that you can get an idea of how that works. So this is the events module. This is actually 3 separate modules. There's the calendar, and then the listing of events underneath, and then over to the right, the events for September. That's essentially a listener module. Those can be dropped on different pages of the site. Again, in the settings for those modules, you can say, I want to listen for these tags, and those are the events that it will pull into that module to list. So again, a lot of fun working on that particular piece. So the Rotator module, I want to take a look at on the live site. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. So Up at the top on the home page, essentially what we did was we wanted a way for images to rotate and for the garden to be able to have marketing messages in the kind of standard sense that you would normally see on a modern website today, where you have buttons and you can click through different slides, and those slides can present different marketing messages, or and not necessarily marketing messages. Perhaps they're informational, or in the sense of, you know, what things are blooming at the garden right now, and then a link, of course, to go off to view more information. We also wanted to give them the ability to target more than just a single audience in this primary, prime real estate area of the homepage. So what we did was made this module so that essentially, if you're interested in the garden attractions, you can click on that tab, and the garden has separate slides in this area where they can market specifically to that area. So for education, I can click on education and see slides related to education. Members can click and see, slides just related to members. And each of those, of course, has the ability to have a caption and a link going off to a different area of the site. So to Liz's point, I think sometimes for some users this can be confusing in the sense that they expect this to be navigation when they click on these items and to take them somewhere throughout the site. But trying to overcome this enormous amount of audiences that the garden has and serves, this was one way to try and provide some real estate on the home page so that everyone felt like felt important when they came to the site and felt like the garden was really listening to and speaking to them as well.
Yep. So that's been a really great feature. I think it also adds a lot of nice visual appeal to that homepage. I'm pretty happy with that. So because of the size of this website and all the work that was involved, we actually had to try to accomplish it in phases. So phase one was designing the new look, installing .NET Nuke, migrating most of the visitor-focused content over, including gardening help. So all of the event information, all the education classes, gardens information, gardening information, plus the two off-site locations. So, phase one was a pretty big phase. Phase two, we are migrating the science and conservation content, but we also created a mobile website. So we installed a later version of .NET Nuke that does handle mobile sites really well. We had an enormous event this summer, this Chinese Lantern Festival, and we knew, getting back to a point you made much earlier, Tish, about the number of people using mobile devices to access web content. So we've been following on Google Analytics the number of people that are trying to access our web content using mobile devices, and it's growing steadily. So we thought we really needed to get something, get a mobile-specific website finished and in place before the beginning of this festival, because we just knew that people were going to be wanting to access that content, and they're going to want to take pictures using their phones. And so we got the designs and the wireframes finished up in the beginning of the year, and we got this mobile website launched the third week in May, was it, Eric?
Yeah, just in the nick of time.
The event started the fourth weekend in May, so we just got it in under the wire. But we are seeing hits to our mobile site rise every week. Every time we look at it, more and more people are accessing us using mobile device. So we're really glad that we have it. As you can see from this screenshot, we have mobile sites for Missouri Botanical Gardens, Shaw Nature Reserve, and Butterfly House. So we did not leave those off-site locations out of the picture. We have a design that can be expanded or contracted with these buttons that take you to the more common sort of locations that people using a mobile access. We have the events module on there. We have a mini version of the slide rotator, and a few mobile pages, and then on every page you need to link out to the main. There's just too much to put it all in a mobile site. We just wanted to sort of give people just enough information to get them around, get them here, get them in, get them where they need to go, get them home, and then for more information that they can access the webpage. So, so that was
She's fading in and out.
with it. I think that's it, right?
Right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks both Liz and Eric. What an amazing story. I am so amazed by the amount of content that you were able to organize in a very clear and accessible way. It must be a challenge for a lot of people out there. So I'm just going to finish up by asking just a couple of brief questions of you guys. Liz, what advice would you give to other organizations who need to do this kind of, who need to take on this kind of website overhaul to prepare them for maybe the things that they don't know?
I would say the lessons that we learned included maybe not involving quite as many people in the decision-making process, because that slows things down a lot. Once we sort of got into figuring out what content needed to be migrated, it became a lot easier to identify good current content from stuff that maybe just didn't need to be moved over. And I think probably going into meetings with people who may be added as a contributor or added into the workflow, knowing something in advance or having a rationale for why some content needs to be moved and some content doesn't need to be moved. And so having those tools in advance, having a plan for doing that, I think makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we did that was really successful was we had people do that work in advance of actually training them to use .NET Nuke, so that when they were practicing getting used to .NET Nuke, they were actually migrating their content. We didn't set up dummy pages for people to play around and practice on, because we knew that we had a lot of work ahead of us. So we got people working right away, but we had already gone through the process of identifying what was going to move and what was going to not move. So people had some very defined tasks in front of them. I think that builds a lot of confidence in people that have never worked on a website before or haven't worked much on a website before. So yeah, just as much pre-planning as you can do, I think, is important.
Around the content, yeah. And Eric, so Eric was part of the Steady Rain, the consulting organization that the Missouri Botanical Gardens brought in to really do this implementation. Eric, what advice would you give to clients who are coming to you with this kind of extensive website design to be prepared for the process? What should they be prepared for?
Well, I think just to echo what Liz just pointed out, I think really the biggest thing to be prepared for is plan. And my experience has been, I know that people get really excited about redeveloping a website and want to jump right in and get something out there that's better for their clients or their visitors. But I really think that a lot of the success of the Missouri Botanical Garden site hinged on lots of conversations between us and the garden, close relationship, and really a lot of planning and talking about not just what button do we want or what page do we want, but really at a higher level, what are the business goals and who are the audiences that are going to be visiting this site and how can we best serve them? There was a tremendous amount of planning that went into the site before we ever started writing a single line of code or installing any modules or doing anything like that. And I think it was really a critical component. It didn't, I don't want to give the impression that there were not things that popped up along the way that we had to stop and address and figure out how to move forward. There certainly were, but it definitely helps minimize those things to a degree the more planning you have on the front end.
Great thoughts from both of you guys. Well, I just want to say thank you again to both of you guys for participating in our web seminar series. And for those of you in our audience who have this kind of challenging project, Eric's contact information is available here on the web seminar platform. and we urge you to take advantage of that. Thank you again for participating, and you guys have a wonderful day.